My name is Al, and I'm a believer who's recovered from alcoholism and drug addiction. What you're about to see is the story of my recovery. My addiction really began when I was about 13 years old, and in the 70s, it was just kind of part of that culture that was going on. It seemed that Vietnam was going on, and there was just this anti-establishment movement that I got caught up in. I had two parents that loved me and provided for me. I'm an only child. We were upper middle class family, and so really I wanted for nothing as a child growing up, and was happy. But when I transferred from a small country school into a large community public high school, I can just remember being terrified and wanting to be accepted and be a part of the group, and I just felt like a fish out of water. And it was really within days that I found a group that I could connect with who would accept me, I guess, and they were kind of they were the rejects, we called the freaks at the time, and I wasn't an athlete, so I didn't fit in with the jocks. I was not into motor, so I wasn't a gearhead, so I kind of went with the crowd that seemed like they were having a lot of fun, and I started smoking pot, and I was actually terrified the first time I smoked pot, but I liked the effects, and I liked the acceptance of the crowd. And I became a daily pot smoker, which most of the kids were doing at that time. I found that I really liked to have fun, and that pleasure became the thing that I sought the most in life. Having been brought up in a Christian home, there was a conflict with that, though. I know deep down morally that I wrestled with the fact that I knew that the life that I was choosing to live was not the true life that I knew God wanted me to live. I grew up going to church, and I'm grateful for that today. It was, foundational in today, the belief in the faith that I have today. But like the prodigal son, I selected to go where it was really just the most enjoyment and pleasure and risk. I'm a risk taker, and I was close with my father up until about that time, and his career took off, so he became like an absentee father. And, today I've been able to, inventory and go back and look at what was going on actually back then. And I was angry that my father had kind of abandoned me, so to speak. Yet he was home every night, but emotionally there was an abandonment. And I rebelled against that, and I acted out against that to get his attention. I know a lot of what I did, a lot of the mischief and the trouble that I got into. I was expecting there to be consequences for it, and it was sort of like, that's fine, at least I'll get some attention from my dad, even be it negative attention. We have a phrase called high-functioning addict, and I do believe that I was addicted to drugs at an early age and alcohol. The minute I started drinking, all I did was transition from really doing more of the drugs in the teens and in my early 20s to alcohol became the thing that I took into my business career, and I had a very successful business career. And alcohol worked really well with my business career. I was in sales for 30 years, and entertaining clients was just really like a license to do what I loved to do and enjoyed to do. In the 80s, cocaine became very popular, and that became my drug of choice because I found that with the combination of alcohol and cocaine, one counteracted the other, so I could be up all night and not be too drunk, and I could kind of control. And then in the late 80s, what ultimately happened was the cocaine addiction overtook the alcohol addiction, and I ended up in my first treatment in 1989. I came pretty close to losing everything at that time. I went through a treatment facility, and I had 10 years of sobriety as a result of that attempt at sobriety. and had some really restorative years during that time and walking with God. But my faith, I think, got tested in about year 8, and I started to cut back on doing some of the things that I knew I needed to do as far as maintaining my life of sobriety. I was running a large company, but I was going through a divorce that was very difficult for me, and the company was going through some difficulties also. And I remember getting a resentment towards God that started to kind of consume me. I was feeling very sorry for myself and the circumstances that were going on. And one thing led to the other, but one night I decided that I could pick up a glass of wine. And it seemed to be okay. I had one glass of wine that night. I figured the next week I could probably have 2 glasses of wine. And then after about a month of this, I was pretty much back into full-blown drinking as much as I had been drinking before, drinking a bottle of vodka, a fifth of vodka a day. And then making decisions that basically spiraled my life out of control. I was still able to maintain a semblance of keeping things together. It was then when I actually left the organization and came down to Florida, which was about 10 years ago. When I arrived in Florida, I got into the real estate market, and it was booming, and so was my drinking at the time. My drinking was extremely heavy, but I was able to balance both, it seemed like. In 2006, the real estate market pretty much crashed. The bubble burst. And I had 5 properties that were in different stages of being rehabbed. I had over about $4 million in properties that now were very difficult to sell, and I was at the height of my drinking. My last drinking episode lasted for 3 weeks long. It was a 3-week binge. I locked myself up in a condominium for 3 weeks. I ate no food, and I ended up in the hospital after collapsing at the elevator doors. And the paramedics came, and I was put into the hospital. And I was alcoholic poisoned at that point. I was almost comatose. And I can remember coming out of this episode with this sense that I had died or was so close to die that I was at death's door. I looked around, and there was nobody that I could call. There was nobody there for me. And, they say spiritual awakenings often are precluded by a rude awakening. And what had happened over this course of this last 7 years of drinking was that I had alienated all of my friends. I had burned all my bridges. I had blown up the relationship that I was in. And they wanted to know who I could call, and the only phone number that I knew that I could call was my parents. And my father came down the next day to visit me in the hospital, and they told him that I pretty much died from alcohol poisoning. And that awakening for me that happened there was I almost died, and the only people that would be at my funeral would be my mother and my father, the 2 people who loved me the most. That impacted my life in a huge way, beyond probably what I can even acknowledge, because I did not want to die that way. I knew God had a plan for my life, and that was not to die that way. So I made some real changes in my life. I'm very grateful for a book that came into my life, which was The Purpose-Driven Life. As I read through that, and it impacted my life in such a way that I determined that a life worth living was a life worth living for God and for people, and not so much for myself. Everything up until that time had been all about me. My anniversary date is May 7th, 2006, and so I'll be celebrating 7 years of sobriety next week. And 6 years ago, after reading that book, I decided that, the greatest investment I could make with my life was to invest it in the lives of other people, not in things that rust or fade away. And what I realized, I When I was at death's door, I asked God that if he would save me, that I would change my life and that I would dedicate it to him and that I would dedicate it to serving him. Two of my favorite life verses, Romans 8:28, where it talks about the fact where he says, "For we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purposes." And as I would meditate on that verse, it began apparent to me that all of the things that had led up until this point, that God could use those things to bring about good in my life. That the experiences that I've had in my past, though a lot of them I regretted and had great remorse and guilt about, that those were the very things that God could use to help me connect with somebody else that might be coming out of the same thing, and to share that there is hope and that there is faith, and that God can be trusted. And he's been so awesome. This last 7 years has been an incredible ride. I actually was asked to teach a class at Salvation Army, which I have done for the last 6 years on purpose-driven life. And as I was teaching this, the meaning of it just became deeper, a part of who I was, and in my belief in that this is God's plan for us, that we identify our uniqueness and that God's got a plan for our lives. His plan is that plan for us is to love and care for other people. And so out of that flowed, I was watching clients as they would go through Salvation Army and complete the great program that they have there, not have places to go that were a safe environment for them. I had had some prior experiences in being in real estate. It just really kind of, God put it on my heart that this was something he was calling me to do, and he brought people into my life. And 2 years ago, I developed a company called Purpose House Transitional Homes. Purpose House, purpose-driven life. And it's just been incredible. We had 5 homes set up in the first year, and it's just been a blessing to see people, the miracles in people's lives happen as they grow in their recovery and their faith, and providing safe, sober environments for them to live as they transition into being, fully independent, living independent lives. And there's a lot of painful things that happen because not everybody makes it. But we celebrate the many that do. But today my life is so full in seeing God, being able to be used by God to see his will played out in other people's lives, but in my life also. And it's just been an amazing ride. I can't imagine it getting any better than this. I really can't. And I'm so grateful today.